Now that Steven Universe is finally over, I can safely say 100% without a doubt that there are a lot of bad faith criticisms of the show, from the fact that the fan base is toxic, to the fact that it's LGBT, which is apparently a problem by itself because politics, and because of something else that I might be comfortable saying later. It's all just a big old mess. And after looking around, I found one primary source of this bad faith criticism, that being ER's video on the matter. People seem to always bring it up as an example of valuable and good critique towards Steven Universe, or at least they used to, and to be perfectly blunt, it's not. ER's video is not a valid critique on Steven Universe, and I'm tired of people using it as a defense to why Steven Universe is bad. It's not a bad video, or even the worst Steven Universe is bad rant that I've seen, but its influence is a serious video giving legitimate criticisms to Steven Universe should be stopped as soon as possible. This video is satire. None of the points are mainly intended to be taken seriously. With that being said, why am I doing this? Why am I taking this silly video as seriously as I can? Well, to answer that question, it's because everybody else takes this seriously, and I want to prove that when taken seriously, this video has less merit, and it's also because of other reasons that I'll explain at the end of the video. The video starts off with him stating that he's seen up to around episode 73, but as a quick note here, he uses some clips and points from episode 74 to justify his claims, so be on the lookout for that. He states that this video is a quote-unquote review, obviously saying that it's not serious. He says it as if it's meant to be an entertaining video for those who hate the series, and that it wasn't really supposed to be rational. For the first few minutes of the video, ER bashes the show hyperbolically, and no points are really made in it. It's basically just him saying that he didn't like the show, and that's generally fine. But the quote-unquote points that he makes don't really come until later, because he uses a lot of "we'll get back to that" statement in rapid succession, as if he has very much to say about it in the end.
Yes, they're lesbians, and we'll get to that. Chalk that up to the show's glorious world building, which we'll get into in a moment.
But there's one thing that he says that I'm honestly not sure of.
But most everybody who disagrees with that assessment will never not disagree with it.
Everyone who says that the show isn't bad will disagree with it? What? Then again, I guess he could be saying that everyone who says the show isn't bad will always say that the show isn't bad, but that's a weird way of phrasing it. Anyways, the first main point that he makes is that there's not really an explanation to why the crystal gems fight other gems, when, in fact, they have stated why, due to corruption, as seen in Ocean Gem. Also, this is probably the dumbest question he could have asked about the show. They mentioned several times that they've had a war, as implied by episodes like Rose Scabbard and Serious Steven, where you see all the weapons lying around, and also Pearl talks about a gem battlefield, and that makes the question itself dumb. Like, let's assume that you were in history class, and your teacher talks about World War II, and you respond, why are humans fighting other humans? But whatever, maybe his point is that they don't go into it too much, and I guess that's fine, except he doesn't really elaborate on it any further to indicate that it's the case. Get used to that. You know what you should also get used to? A lack of evidence for most of his points. For example, the point immediately after the first one talks about why nobody cares about the destruction of the city or the frequency of gems until now, despite the fact that it has been brought up that the gems have been there for both story for Steven and for historical friction, which could imply that they've gotten used to the gems living in Beach City and fighting these gems. But then again, episodes like Beach Party do contradict this. Or, the easier implication, the only reason they would actually go to Beach City, since they don't have any other reason to be there, is because Steven is there, and despite the fact that they've been there for thousands of years, Steven and his need to interact with Beach City requires the gems to be there as well. You know, like the plot for episodes like Frybo, Watermelon Stevens, Arcade Mania, Tiger Millionaire, and Onion Trade. Does he bring any of this up? No. Yet people still take this video seriously. At least try. He then says that he's not going to be able to make a play-by-play about everything wrong with the show. And yeah, I get why you don't want to bring up every instance there's a mistake. I mean, you've got the time on your hands that you don't want to waste. I get that. But if you make these claims, you better have to bear the burden of proof. He then talks about the formula of the show.
Steven Universe follows a formula as reliable as Phineas and Ferb's, only without the self-awareness or the once-in-a-blue-moon clever writing.
Which are as follows. Either Steven is sad, the gems are sad, or there's an alien trouble, then Steven suggests a solution, and the gems disagree, and then they meet in between or use Steven's solution, and then live happily ever after. To disprove this point, I've watched over all 74 of these episodes to see if his claim truly does hold true, as there were a lot of episodes to my initial memory that followed this formula. But when I compiled all of them, or at least all that I could remember, there were about 20 of them overall, and the ones with tildes that I have here are the ones that slightly follow the story, but doesn't really have a focus. In fact, there are episodes like Indirect Kiss and Alone Together that go out of their way to subvert it, with Steven not healing Amethyst, or with the gems not interfering with Steven and Connie fusing. Oh god, fusion. We'll get to this point a little later, but for now, 20 out of 47 isn't even close to what counts as the majority.
What are we gonna do? What? Me?
Oh my god, I can't believe this. It's amazing that the evidence that he uses from Cheeseburger Backpack, specifically the clip that he uses, directly goes against his point by showing that they are asking Steven for help instead of the gems wanting to do it their way. It's horrible, especially considering that several clips earlier from the same episode, they could have done well to prove your point. Unless you were using it to refer to the plot point immediately after, in which case, you should have shown some sort of progression from story beat 2 to story beat 3, because anyone watching this otherwise wouldn't think that this was a compelling argument. Wait a second. I'm skipping this next bit because he talks about the lack of an overarching story, which, yeah, it's a valid complaint, especially with the episodes he's seen, and hey, he uses a pretty good example, so you know what, I'll give you props for doing this, and it's definitely valid for what you've seen. But it has to be said that this video is only for the first season and a half, and he doesn't go into detail about why it's a problem other than the fact that the fans praise it, being that it doesn't actually have any bearing to the quality of Steven Universe. Still, props. He goes on to say how he doesn't really like the art style, which is fine, but it isn't really detailed as criticism. It's just that there's a style with this and he doesn't like it. He doesn't really say why he doesn't like it, but all we know is that he doesn't like it. He still concedes that it's subjective, so that's always nice. Then he talks about the voice acting with jokes and says that Garnet can't emote. With the examples that he uses, I can understand where he's coming from, and how every time that she emotes, or in this case, gets angry, she sounds the same, except for the volume of her voice. But, isn't that kind of the point of her character? To act as the serious member of the group and only raising her voice instead of yelling? To be a stoic character, because they only yell when something is disturbing them emotionally? Like Skips from Regular Show, or Raven from Teen Titans? He then shares his criticisms of the music, which are either decent in some places, desperately trying to imitate classic Disney, or hipster trash. In case you were waiting for a surprise, no. He doesn't give praise to where the show works, therefore creating good criticism towards the show and supporting his first point. Instead, he gives evidence, though it is sparing, towards Steven Universe's music being, what was it again? Desperately imitating Disney or hipster trash? And there's a big problem with this first claim. There are more than a few examples where it could technically be applied, like the parallels between Strong in the Real Way and I'll Make a Man Out of You, and how they both talk from the point of view of the instructor to encourage those who they're instructing to do better while training them to do so, eventually ending with them being stronger. Hakuna Matata parallels Be Wherever You Are and the Don't Care About Your Problems ideology, and I guess they do share some similar notes, not tempo, instruments, or actual composition, but similar notes. And that's the main problem, since all of these are only coincidental, as nothing else about them shows similarities. Composition-wise, it's more similar to Adventure Time, and if you did say that, then I would have been inclined to agree with you. But instead, the one example that you arguably choose is Stronger Than You, which is not only the unique outlier of the songs of Steven Universe that usually use playful ukuleles, rock and electric guitars, and gentle pianos, but it's a relatively different genre than most classic Disney songs, leaning more towards funk. The second part, sure, ukuleles are hipster instruments, and if you think that this is trash, then sure, it's hipster trash. Okay, got it. And then he says that it's not worthy of praise or scorn, which is, I guess, his justification for his first comment, but still, it's not very well thought out. Then he says that world building is bad because of names. He does support his point that the world building isn't good, with the names of the primary locations being Beach City and Homeworld, and yeah, I agree with him for the names. The only unique name that I could even argue that's in this series is the kindergarten, because it's literally a garden for kids. But that's pretty much it. But he puts a hashtag hypocrisy notice, and this confuses me. Is he trying to say that it's hypocritical to praise the world building because the names of the locations aren't good? Well, technically, the name of a world doesn't really come into world building that much. I mean, it might, but it couldn't do more than doing stuff like establishing the rules of the world, the history behind the world, and how people in the world operate. I mean, Finn the human lives in Oo. Does that automatically mean that Oo is not developed? Hey, editor's note here. After a lot of thinking, I've come to the realization that there's another conclusion that you can get from it. You could also get that it refers to the fact that the gems want the other gems to leave the Earth, due to them disturbing organic life, despite the fact that the crystal gems are also gems on Earth, disturbing organic life. I only got this by thinking about the context of the Avatar clip. Not only is this point irrelevant to the one that you're making now, but it's also bad as A, most of the gems are fought on the Earth, and the crystal gems had no way to get back into space, as demonstrated with Space Race. B, from the very first few episodes, heck, from the theme song, you know that the crystal gems are a cause trying to protect the Earth. And C, the idea that all gems are bad would only be perpetuated by someone dumber than the Beach City residents, because you yourself point out that they are different from the gem monsters, and that them being opposed to each other is a present issue in the story.
Now, for some reason, the gems have to stop other meanie gems from fucking up the Earth, and I don't know why.
Rose Quartz believed all life was precious and worth protecting.
They were doing something awful to the planet, and your mother couldn't stand it anymore. She told me that's why she had to turn on her own kind. But why?
Alright, first props. He backed up his claim with valid evidence to said claim. And yes, they don't answer some of the things that they bring up with Rose. That is correct. But why is that a bad thing? Sure, it's unclear, but what if it was mystery that could have been used to make the story more interesting? Now, if it was something with the world building, then I could see why it's sort of confusing. But the evidence you bring up is about Rose Quartz, a character that is meant to be mysterious, supported by the fact that she's only been mentioned briefly, or is on screen briefly, in flashbacks for the 73 episodes that you've seen. Not to mention, there's your answer. Why gems are fighting other gems. You just pointed out. Good job. Thanks for that. Finally, while I won't deny that there are a few things to Steven Universe that weren't clear by the time you were watching, the way that you want more world building by asking why over and over doesn't help your case at all, since the context you're given could be all the context that you need, and you could also literally apply that same questioning to any show, or even any work of fiction. He then talks about the fact that the cluster was revealed after 72 episodes. And, okay, despite the fact that it was 70, which isn't really a big thing, but still, they didn't know about it because they didn't know Peridot yet. And you saying that nothing has come of it is kinda weird for someone who's talking 2 episodes in advance. Okay, granted, by this time, Season 3 didn't come out, and he could have looked it up, so why didn't you wait for Season 3? It's not like they said in any of this time that Steven Universe's finale was coming up, nor that it was cancelled, so what the heck? Alright, there's a few points left, and they all lead to a big one. First, the gems are lesbians. This is how he explains it.
Not really though, because they're not technically women, but gems, okay? Remember that, guys. They're not women. The gems are not binary or sexually dimorphic, okay? You got that?
They still go by female pronouns and take the forms of unambiguously humanoid females, but they're not female, okay? Hey, these lesbians here, these lesbians. They're not women. They're not lesbians here. They're strong, independent gems. And everybody loves the portrayal of women heroes finally pure representation of women. They're not gems.
The fact that gems are lesbians were all confirmed by how, despite the fact that in universe they're not women, they act like women and look like women. There, I said it in one line. Why does he have to make it a whole bunch of confusion? I mean, if it's a joke, not a point, nor evidence, so whatever. The gems are women. Okay, I'm skipping the rest of this joke explanation. After a joke, and then a joke explanation about Rose, in the way that he explains the gems are women, and a joke explanation about Garnet, then there's this. He tries to imply that fusion is sex with the same joke explanation that he used before. This is the only validation for his claim, yet so many people take it seriously despite the lack of explanation in this claim. Oh wait, he does give an explanation, because the poses that are done are provocative.
See, they don't contort into these provocative poses because there's anything inherently sexual about fusion. No. It's just their transformation sequence.
You know, provocative, provoking something, but not explicitly doing anything about it. It's like saying that tapping on a fish tank is the same thing as poking the fish. And yes, those dances are inherently sexual, but it doesn't mean that it automatically means sex. Flirting is different from kissing. It's more accurate to say that they're based on relationships, considering that it makes more sense metaphorically, as most fusion is done when something needs to be accomplished, like saving Steven, going out for dinner, lifting a drill, destroying a tower, or just wanting to be together, but we'll get to that. And after this joke, he says that Pearl rapes Garnet. Oh my god. The worst part about this is that not only is the pretenses for this statement false, as I just proved, but even if he comes up with another example to support his claim, the conclusion he would come to is not that his initial conclusion is wrong, but that those behind Steven Universe are bad at coming up with metaphors. Cause, using these 73 episodes of examples, Steven and Connie regularly have it, and the first time that they did involves them going into a store, ordering donuts, going to a rave, and getting hit on while they were doing it. said, "Man, Jasper and Lapis are sure in abusive sex, where one takes advantage of the other and forces them to do so, and they constantly fight." Wait, what? Garnet has sex all the time. In fact, for any activity that they do, they always have it. When Connie's parent meets the Gems, it was originally a 4G. When Garnet and Amethyst have sex, it becomes so aggressive that it must be stopped. Because of that aggressive sex, Garnet doesn't want to have sex with Amethyst and instead has sex with Pearl right in front of Amethyst. Again, it's relationships, not sex. I was gonna end it around here, because that's technically the last point that he makes about Steven Universe itself. But he shows 2 articles to support his claim that Steven Universe is stupid because of how they aren't knowledgeable about the conclusion that he came to. In fact, these 2 articles go to give him active evidence that his claim is wrong. And the one quote that he uses talks about how wrong shard fusion is, which makes sense since that's the act of Frankensteining body parts into keeping a relationship alive. It's also another example to how his metaphor doesn't work. Let's see, what else? He talked about the history of gender, not really trying to prove anything, but trying to say that the study of gender is apparently screwed up. Okay. Doesn't mean that the concept of gender will always be screwed up, so whatever, it's just a fun fact. He talked about how he doesn't like the references in these shows. He says the Steven Universe is a special, unique kind of awful, and then he ends it on a Hitler joke. Okay, what else? Oh yes, there's that, but you know what, I'll leave that till the very end. Due to my aggravated, kind of annoyed tone I presented throughout this critique, you might think that I hate this video with a burning passion, or with lukewarm indifference. Despite all this, I will be very clear that this video, on many other levels, isn't that bad. Like I've pointed out several times in this video, he's got a lot of jokes, and I did find myself laughing at a few of them. And like I addressed at the beginning, he's not trying to come up with any serious arguments against the show. In fact, if you look at his other videos, he does take the time to critique both The Legend of Korra and the new Death Note in an insightful and honestly thought-provoking way, not only providing the evidence that he needs, but taking the time to look through what he finds in his research to come up with reasonable conclusions. This entire video isn't trying to degrade him, nor is it meant for him to improve his critiquing skills. I went through the arguments of this video because so many other people take the critiques of this video to justify their own argument when it's rarely ever applicable, and that, even with this, there's no reason for many people to take this video as something credible. So why do they do this? The simple answer is, it's Poe's law. At a certain level, there is confusion between what is satire and what is serious rhetoric, and this is a perfect example of it, because the editing quality and the overall confidence in the tone behind this video make it sound serious and well-informed by connecting points in a confident way, despite how little evidence there is behind it, when rarely any of it is, especially in regards to Steven Universe. So many people take this video as an insult because of this tone and the indistinguishable nature between this being a joke or this being seen as legitimate criticism, and especially nowadays, that's something that you have to learn to distinguish, because first impressions are always misleading. A clickbait title could be bad news, or it could be just that. A clickbait title. Sure, it's somewhat insidious and extremely scummy, but it doesn't detract from the rest of the video or what it's trying to do. It'll take you 5 seconds, let's say a full minute of the time, that's dedicated to look at a thumbnail and a title to a video, depending on recommendations and how often you get, but compared to that, and watching through the video, it makes up to around 3% of the content supplied, technically, and you can't judge the entirety of something by focusing on a minor part of it. Speaking of that, let's talk about the fanbase bashing. Yeah, I haven't brought this up until the end for a certain reason. For the times where ER isn't making bad points or somewhat good jokes, he's almost always talking about the fanbase and the positive praise of Steven Universe. The main points that he uses for this are the fact that people push the importance of the political subtext of Steven Universe before looking at it as a show with various qualities, and besides borderline propaganda against liberals, he also brought up the instance of attempted suicide from an artist who was being overly hated for drawing Rose skinny, and I went ahead and looked into it more. Turns out it wasn't just because she drew Rose skinny, but equally from drawing Fluttershy from My Little Pony as a stereotypical Native American. Not only that, but she also got harsh criticism for some cosplay. But here's the thing, it's also all from Tumblr. So for the sake of this comparison, let's assume that around 2/3 of them are teenagers or adults that use social media, because the rest of them would be kids who grow up and like Steven Universe genuinely without being associated with the online culture. Let's also assume that 1/4 of these guys use Tumblr, because YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter are generally used for more information in general, despite the obvious overlap between each site and the users that use them. Let's say that half of those people are mad at Zombie for something that she did, and 1/3 of them dislike her specifically for Steven Universe, as the other 2/3 would get mad about her for Fluttershy or cosplay. You end up with around 2.7% of the entire fanbase that these critiques are lobbed at, not counting the amount of people who were mad at her that didn't tell her to kill herself or antagonize her, or the fact that half the people who like Steven Universe and use Tumblr even know of Zami, or those that initially doing so regretted their decision before she attempted suicide. Overall, while you may like this video and this content creator, this video is not a good defense for hating Steven Universe, and none of it should be taken as seriously as it is. From the lazy points to the inept longer tirades that ER presents, to all the jokes that he makes, it's shown that taking the video seriously wasn't the intent that he had with it. Goodbye.